Okay, so in this set of slides I'd like to give you more suggestions about focusing your paper. And what I'd like to remind you of first is that your task, of course, as you know, is to define the term technical communication. But that is a very large task, as you've found out. There's a lot of debate, there are a lot of discussions going on about exactly what that term means, and you only have a few pages to do that. So I don't expect you to come up with some kind of a all-encompassing final answer. Instead, what I would suggest is that you pick one theory, one concept, one approach that you have encountered during the readings and discussions we've had in this class, and then structure your definition or focus your definition around that one theory, concept, or approach. For example, this is how it might work. So let's say you're interested in the three models of communication that were presented to us by Slack and her co-authors: transmission, translation, or articulation. Let's say you really wanted to explore how the presence of these three models influenced our ideas about technical communication. So your whole paper could be structured around these three models. So what you might do, for instance, is say, okay, I'm going to look at TechCom through the frame of these three kinds of ideas about communication: what they are, how they work, how they interact with one another. Use Slack's article heavily to explain these models, and then say, okay, where do I stand on these? And I would say that probably transmission or translation are less preferable. The current state of the field leans towards articulation, so you could then say, okay, um, this is my vision of this of how these three models work in modern TechCom, and this is why I think that way. So this is one lens that you could take. Or you could, for instance, go back to Johnson A. Lola's article and talk about symbolic analytic work. You could say that, for instance, if you think that the notion of symbolic analytic work really influences how technical communicators perceive themselves and function in the 21st century, you could structure a whole paper around that notion. Again, relying on Johnson A. Lola's article heavily to explain and clarify this notion, and then say how you would apply it in the work of technical and professional communication. Or, for instance, you could go back to Dobrin, who I think of all the readings we've seen has developed the most comprehensive definition of TechCom, and you can talk about TechCom as the process of accommodating the technology to the user, and discuss what that means to you and how you see that working in practice. So that's another frame you could take. But finally, you could go to more and talk about the role and place of instrumental discourse in defining the term technical communication. For instance, how does Moore define it? Again, rely on the article to explain what the term means, and then think about some possible applications of the term, how it affects our work in the 21st century, how it affects the way we think of the term technical communication. So these are four possible angles that you can take at attacking this paper, this assignment. Choose one, focus on one, and go from there. You don't have to include everything we've read, everything we've discussed. That would be impossible in a short paper like that. In fact, it will probably be impossible in any length paper, because every good paper needs to be focused on some arguments, some key points. And then if you come up with something else that I forgot to mention here, if you have some other idea about defining or explaining the field, I should probably use the word explaining rather than defining the field of TechCom, feel free to use that as well, instead of those four things that I had suggested. Whatever you do, remember to explain your terms fully, and to explain them you will need to use the articles that these terms came from to you. So don't be shy about using the source material. By this I mean summarize the arguments that the authors present. Don't overquote, but it's okay to quote every once in a while. Short things. This is a short paper, so overquoting will not work well. And then give evidence from the readings, and you might include some evidence from your own experience if you like, but primarily your evidence will probably come from the readings, just because this is where these things are explained and this is how you came to know about them. And finally, don't forget to document and cite your sources using the MLA style, both documentation in the text, parenthetical references to page numbers and such, and a works cited at the end of the paper. If you forgot what the MLA style looks like, Google it. There are a lot of good sources. This citation task is pretty simple because you're working with one type of sources, and that is the article, the academic article. And as always, if you have any questions about this presentation, let me know. Post a comment on the front page or post a comment in the forums. Thank you very much, and I hope this helps.